Good morning. It's Tuesday. It's December 20th, and we start with a Fox News alert. A wave of terror attacks sweeping the world with incidents in Berlin, Germany, in Turkey, in Zurich, in Switzerland as well.
Meanwhile, in Berlin, a dozen people are dead this morning and dozens more hurt after a semi-trailer truck that had just turned off its light smashed into a busy Christmas market 40 miles per hour. Meanwhile, in Ankara, Turkey, Russia's ambassador to Turkey assassinated by an off-duty police officer on live TV.
Yeah, and in Switzerland, 3 people are hurt and the gunman dead after an attack on a Zurich mosque.
So a lot to talk about this morning. The interesting thing about, officially they haven't said any of them are terror yet, although one of the guys did yell, particularly the guy who executed the ambassador on television, Allahu Akbar.
Yes.
Regarding the Berlin Christmas market attack, apparently the driver, who has been identified as Naveed B, 23 years old, he's a Pakistani asylum seeker. He was only in Germany for a couple of months, apparently on New Year's Eve a year ago. He left from Pakistan, went through the Balkans, then went in to the country of Germany, as we look at live images of downtown Berlin, with thousands of other refugees. He entered the country under a false name. He was found with several different IDs. He's got a criminal record, and the country of Germany said, come on in.
Here's the deal. People were there shopping for Christmas presents. They were in a Christmas market, and this guy steals a truck, a semi-truck, goes 40 miles per hour through the crowd, and rolls over women and men, moms and dads and children. And to see those images and to see, you're looking at the live picture, but yesterday you could see people there in the streets with white blankets over them, or white tarps over them.
Absolutely. I mean, a 23-year-old Pakistani refugee, as you said, Steve, had been in Germany for only a few months, was seeking asylum, a refugee. But you can wait to determine whether or not it was officially inspired or motivated or led by ISIS. But this is a tactic that they have pointed out and said they want to use. It costs nothing. You don't have to have an allegiance to the country that you're in. You don't need any special training. You just need the ability to steal a truck, which this one was apparently stolen in Poland, driven into Germany, and with the driver either taken hostage or killed, and then he used it to mow through. As you said, the target very intentional, likely. A Christmas market, a Christian holiday. If you're waging jihad, you choose that for a specific reason.
I was watching the images that we had earlier on our show on Fox and Friends First. You had police officers here in New York City patrolling Christmas markets, because you see these Christmas markets all over New York City. I was passing one just yesterday, and you see these police officers just decked out with their guns ready to go. And that is it is very chilling to know it is Christmas. You're shopping for your families. It's a loving time of the year, yet we still have to be vigilant and have to be protective, just in case something like this happens here.
And you know what? There were warnings, because this was the ultimate soft target. Just a bunch of people enjoying their lives, going around. The guy, all he had was a truck. He knew how to drive, and his heart was filled with hate. And you can see the people there in Germany this morning picking up the pieces. Meanwhile, you look at the incoming president of the United States, there is no doubt what he's talking about, because he made it very clear shortly after, he wants to eradicate this kind of poison from the world.
That's right. He put out a statement shortly after that attack saying, these terrorists and their regional and worldwide networks must be eradicated from the face of the earth, a mission we will carry out with all freedom-loving partners. He went on to tweet as well saying, the civilized world must change thinking on how we take on this threat.
He wants to eradicate. He wants to wipe ISIS off the face of the earth. Meanwhile, the Pentagon sends this statement out. They say that we are deeply saddened by today's horrendous events at a Christmas market in Berlin. The United States stands firmly with the German people during this time of national sadness, and we offer any support that they may require. We have to be past the sadness at this point. We have to be, obviously we are sad. This is awful that this is happening to individuals around the world. But it's time to wipe ISIS off the face of the earth. This is happening here. Ohio State, just last month? You had Nice this past summer. I mean, this is
the
enough.
American people are sick of the reaction of sadness. If they wanted more sadness, they would have gone with Hillary Clinton. And if everyone wants thoughts and prayers are important. But at some point, you have to step up and say, we're going to done being sad. We're going to start being vigilant. We're going to stop being politically correct.
This is why people voted for Donald Trump.
Exactly.
Because they want the borders secure. Because there are reports in Germany.
These things happen. When you don't have borders, you don't demand allegiance, you don't call the enemy what it is, you let anyone in, these types of things happen. Policies have consequences. Sadness doesn't help anybody.
Well, here's the thing. This open doors policy is that of Angela Merkel, who, coming up shortly, is going to be running for her 4th term as Germany's chancellor. There are a lot of people inside her country right now who would like to close the borders. It's interesting, though, in the wake of this, CNN had an op-ed writer who used the terror attack to start talking a little bit about bashing the right-wing candidates who want to secure the border.
Sure.
This fella's name, the columnist, is David Andelman, and he wrote in part, right-wing candidates are positioning themselves against immigration and Islam, defending an even tougher stance with every new terrorist assault. There is a full-scale attack on traditional democratic values that many are increasingly coming to fear are only giving aid and comfort to the kinds of jihadists preparing to drive their trucks into crowds of innocents enjoying themselves. So in other words, these right-wing people want to close us off and have borders, whereas we should be welcoming as many people.
Somehow that's the aid and comfort to jihadists if you want a border and you want to know. It took them a long time to identify who the attacker was, because if you don't know who's in your country, you can't maintain control, and law and order is very, very difficult.
The guy had like 3 driver's licenses.
Exactly. This is blame America first in Europe, right? It's this idea that ISIS doesn't have jobs, so it's our fault. And somehow we're bringing this upon ourselves. It's the reflex of the left oftentimes that the threat isn't real, and if we just sort of apologize a little bit more and appease a little bit more, everything will be fine.
So is he trying to say that Republicans are taking advantage of situations like this to try to close the borders?
He's talking about right-wing politicians in Europe.
He's talking right-wing politicians everywhere, that when they want to close the border, when they want extreme vetting, when they want to go after ISIS or call it radical Islamic terrorism, somehow that fans the flames, and so it's actually our fault that the jihadists come after us.
It's not a partisan issue. It's just a fact that ISIS wants to do this type of thing over and over and over, that they want to eradicate Christians and anyone who doesn't believe in their ideology. But it's got to be, it's a fact that they're doing this in countries. We've got to protect the borders. We've got to get the criminals that are here illegally out of the country. This is exactly why people went to the polls to vote for Donald Trump.
They're waging a religious war against us, and if we don't understand their motivations, you can't take it on.
Well, it's
just unbelievable that people think that anyone would buy into this ideology, that you believe it's okay to get behind the wheel of a truck and just wipe out individuals that are Christmas shopping.
It is breaking news over there. The 3 attacks. We have further details coming up a little later on. In the meantime, let's talk about the story that has consumed us ever since the election, and that was, the Democrats, for the most part, were trying to get members of the Electoral College to flip and become so-called faithless
That was
electors.
Plan B. What was Plan A?
Well, Plan A was to beat him at the polls the first time.
The recount.
Plan B was the recount.
Oh, right, okay.
We're at
C now?
Yeah, the Electoral College.
Plan B right now.
The Democrats right now are 0-3 regarding Donald Trump. And regarding these faithless electors, you were looking at the mainstream media, legacy media, people talking about, well, we got to get these Republicans to flip. In the end, and it's interesting because the headlines are that there were 2 electors who defied the will of the state voters, but they don't mention the fact that Hillary Clinton actually had 5 voters flip on her. In the state of Texas, 2 Republicans, one decided he wanted to vote for John Kasich and Ron Paul. In Washington State, 4 Democrats refused to vote for Hillary. Instead, they voted for Colin Powell and an Native American Indian activist by the name of Faith Spotted Eagle. And in Hawaii, 1 Democrat voted for Bernie Sanders. So Hillary actually lost more ground yesterday than Donald Trump did.
So Donald Trump has secured the election now.
He was over 270 early.
Do you think this is the end?
No.
Do you think that the left is going to rest now?
Of course not. They're going to continue to discredit and try to do anything they can.
They're going to try to impeach him, according to a Howie Carr column today in the Boston papers.
It's true, but Donald Trump is president-elect of the United States, and the Electoral College sealed it yesterday. All that blustering, and it goes out with a whisper.
Yeah, Bill Clinton yesterday was one of the electors in the Electoral College. and he has been blaming the FBI and the Russians for her loss. He was at a bookstore in Katona, New York, and took a shot at Trump. Asked if Donald Trump was a smart guy. He said, I don't know if he knows much, but one thing he does know is how to get angry white men to vote for him. So Bill Clinton is still bitter Bill.
Way to go.
Let's hand it over to Heather, who has some more headlines for us. Hey, Heather, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for working here yesterday, sitting here. You did such a good job.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. It was nice to be in for you, but we sure missed you.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Good morning to all of you. We have a Fox News alert to bring you right now, and this comes from overseas. China now returning the U.S. drone that was seized from the South China Sea as tensions run high between Washington and Beijing. The Pentagon slamming the communist nation for what defense officials are calling the unlawful seizure of the unmanned vessel. The Navy says the drone was doing routine operations in international waters, but we now have it back. The search intensifying at this hour for the man who killed a toddler in a road rage shooting. Police in Little Rock, Arkansas, now increasing the reward to $40,000. That little 3-year-old was caught in the crossfire while riding in a car with his grandmother and 1-year-old sibling. They were headed to the store. Police say the shooter became enraged because he thought the boy's grandmother was driving too slow. That suspect honking at her and then getting out of the car and firing a single deadly shot. Well, today, the FBI search warrant used to reopen Hillary Clinton's email investigation will be unsealed. It's the warrant the feds used to search Anthony Weiner's laptop for traces of classified information sent from Hillary Clinton's private server. Weiner's estranged husband of Clinton aide Huma Abedin. Clinton and her campaign aides have argued that FBI Director James Comey's letter reopening that case cost her the election. And that's part of what Steve was just saying that Bill Clinton had talked about over the weekend. Well, a record number of criminals soon could be walking the streets thanks to the Obama administration. The president pardoning 78 criminals and commuting the sentences of 153 others, making it a single-day record for the presidential clemency power, the largest in American history. This while he was on vacation. Take a look at that. That's the president golfing in Honolulu yesterday. It's the latest development in his clemency crusade. It started in 2014 to shorten the sentences of drug offenders. He says they're nonviolent, those drug offenders and drug dealers, and that's why they should get clemency or let go early.
Lot going on.
Yes, certainly.
All right,
I'll see you soon.
thank you.
Thanks.
All right, coming up more on our top story, ISIS taking credit for the horrific attack on a Christmas market in the city of Berlin. Could we in the United States be next? Counterterrorism expert Jim Hansen here with how America should respond today.
And electors all across the country getting harassed and threatened for voting for Donald Trump. So why isn't the DOJ investigating?
One day I had a couple of emails from the same person that said they were going to follow me, but they were going to make us very uncomfortable because they knew where we lived.
A Fox News alert. Live photos right here. ISIS taking credit for the truck attack in Berlin that killed a dozen people and injured almost 50 more. And police agree it was definitely an intentional act. And these images just gripping and powerful of the devastation left behind. Jim Hansen conducted counterterrorism operations while serving in the U.S. Army Special Forces, and he joins us now to react. Good morning, Jim. Obviously, these images are stirring. This administration talks about sadness and thoughts and prayers, and of course, those are emotions that we all have. But how vulnerable are we to this type of attack, and how should Germany and the West be responding?
Well, Pete, I think you're smart enough to know and experienced enough to know that when someone declares war on you, you don't invite them to your country. And that's the problem. Chancellor Merkel has been importing jihadists in massive numbers, more than 1 million last year alone. That's dangerous when you know you cannot vet them. And as you guys said earlier, they have no idea who this guy was. He had multiple pieces of identity, but they allowed him into the country along with millions of others. We're doing the same thing. President-elect Trump has a policy he's announced where he says he will pause immigration from jihadist-influenced areas. That seems like a very common sense way to start this.
Jim, so as you said, they've been importing jihadists or those wishing to do them harm in Europe. What can they do about those already there? What options do they have on the table in light of the fact that they've already let the enemy in?
Yeah, that's scary. I don't know enough about the internal workings of German security and their laws, but the bottom line is we know which community it is. It's not all Muslims. Let's be perfectly clear. All Muslims are not terrorists, but most of the terrorists these days do follow their version of Islam, and they're fighting for Allah. So you have to start looking there and do everything you can within your laws to conduct surveillance and try to stop these things before they happen.
Yeah, you mentioned the president-elect commenting on the attack. This is what he said yesterday on Twitter. He said, today there were terror attacks in Turkey, Switzerland, and Germany, and it's only getting worse. The civilized world must change thinking. I think that last sentence is a very powerful one. The civilized world changing its thinking. How does the West, America, need to change our viewpoint and our thinking and our policies to adjust to this new reality where a guy doesn't need money or expertise, just needs a truck and a Christmas market?
Yeah, ISIS put out the call to action saying you don't have to build a bomb and flag yourself by doing something that complicated. As long as you drive over and kill infidels, you are one of the blessed. And that's something we need to go ahead and acknowledge. The enemy is here. We have people in our country. I mean, when I came in this morning, I searched to see if any new news was on this. My Google came up with Nice attack and OSU attack, which were both truck attacks. They don't have to do complicated things to kill us, and we need to pay attention to the fact that they're working that angle right now, right here, and we need to face that.
And how worried are you about another attack like this happening in the United States this Christmas season?
Terrified, Pete. You know, I think we'll be lucky to survive without it, but how long has it been since OSU? You know, I think in this case, we have people here who probably are watching the news right now saying, I could be the next ISIS guy. And that's the big thing they learned. ISIS doesn't have to designate. Obama bragged that ISIS hasn't engineered any attacks here. They don't have to. They just make the call and the jihadists hear it and go ahead and take credit for it later. That's the best thing ISIS could do. It's much safer and it's working for them.
Yeah, if I hear you, it's less sadness and thoughts and more vigilance and clarity about the nature of the enemy. Jim Hansen, thanks a lot for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Pete.
Appreciate it. All right, before casting their ballots for the president-elect, members of the Electoral College faced death threats and harassments.
One day I had a couple emails from the same person that said they were going to follow me and they were going to make us very uncomfortable because they knew where we lived.
So listen to that. So why isn't the DOJ investigating? A Department of Justice whistleblower here next. And illegal scrambling to find a way to stay after President-elect Trump takes office. And now they're getting immigration lawyers for free? Stick around to hear this one.
We have some quick headlines for you. Los Angeles wants to create a $10 million justice fund for illegals, using your tax dollars to provide legal services and them from being deported. Half of the money comes from public funds. The other half would come from private groups. Tomorrow is your last chance to buy an AR-15 in the Golden State. Why? Starting on January 1st, a new law will classify the guns as assault rifles, which can't be legally sold in the state of California. The state requires a 10-day waiting period before buyers can pick up their rifles. So the clock is ticking. Steve?
All right. Thank you very much, Ainsley. Electors have cast their votes, and Donald Trump won again, but not before members of the Electoral College were harassed and in some cases threatened for their lives just because of who they were about to vote for.
One day I had a couple emails from the same person that said they were going to follow me and they were going to make us very uncomfortable because they knew where we lived and that I needed to cast a vote for Trump. Well, the next day on the freeway, I was actually looked to my right and I see people following me actually with their phone up against the window videoing. They slowed down behind. They got in front of my car. When I was at a traffic light, they were taking pictures. And that happened 2 days in a row and two different people.
You know what? But despite similar threats reported by a lot of electors, the Department of Justice is not investigating voter intimidation. Why not? Let's talk to former Department of Justice attorney turned whistleblower, Jake Christian Adams, joins us from our nation's capital. Good morning to you, Jake Christian.
Hey, Steve.
Okay, so it wasn't just simple intimidation. We're talking about people were getting death threats. I'm going to put a bullet in your head. That kind of intimidation, I think, is a federal crime if proven, isn't it?
It is. It's political terrorism, Steve. There are multiple federal statutes do not allow you to give death threats to electors. But understand, this is a larger effort to destabilize the system, destabilize the Electoral College. There are people out there that spend millions of dollars trying to destabilize the Electoral College, and these threats are a part of it because it tries to alter the outcome of the election.
Well, I get the idea of how the left is trying to delegitimize the future presidency of Donald Trump. But the Department of Justice, that lady Justice, she's got a blindfold. She's not supposed to look at politics. She's just supposed to figure out, okay, is that against the law or not? And if it is, I'm going to go after somebody. Where are they?
Well, they're not there because of the fact that the electors were going to vote for Trump. That's the reason that they're not doing anything. That's how this Justice Department plays. If you are against them, they don't help you. There are federal statutes exactly on point, Steve.
Yeah.
You cannot send threats by interstate communications to kill people, especially if they're electors. It's a federal crime. The FBI hasn't even called the electors to ask them what happened.
Now, Jay Christian, if, for instance, Greenpeace was intimidated or something like that, or Black Lives Matter, and there were death threats against them, don't you think the Department of Justice would investigate that?
Well, particularly Black Lives Matter, but imagine if Hillary had won this election and all of these alleged white supremacists in the alt-right were threatening the electors for Hillary. We all know exactly what would happen and what should happen,
right?
Because the system has to be preserved. You must have a system where people can vote according to the rule of law, not according to the chaos that the left wants to impose on America.
We had the guy we just heard from in that soundbite a moment ago was on our program just about 24 hours ago, and he called on the president to tell people to stop with the intimidation because it's just not the way we're better than that, essentially, is what he said. It would have been nice to have heard from the president, but to your point about it all being political, I guess we wouldn't hear from him, would we?
Remember Ferguson? Remember what happened after that police officer used legitimate deadly force? You had the president, the attorney general, all of them grandstanding about a lie. And now you have real threats to the system, the constitutional order, by threats toward electors, and they're deadly silent. It shows you what these people are all about, and good riddance to them on January 20th.
Well, let's talk a little bit about January 21st. If it goes through, the Attorney General will be former Senator Jeff Sessions. Is there a statute of limitations on this kind of thing? Could he look into voter intimidation of these Electoral College voters?
Let's hope he does. 18 U.S.C. 875C. That's the statute if any of you U.S. attorneys need help. That's the statute that prohibits you from using interstate commerce to send threats to people. Section 11 of the Voting Rights Act prohibits people from threatening people for voting or making a vote effective. I think it applies to the Electoral College. Those are the statutes that on January 21st, the FBI can pay a visit to these electors still and show that times have changed, that the rule of law is back, and you can't threaten the constitutional order by threatening electors.
Well, the good news is, Jay Christian, apparently it didn't work because there were just a couple of people who did flip, and more of them flipped for Hillary.
Yeah, but Steve, they play the long game, and they know that this is the first time they ever tried to destabilize the Electoral College, and they know that they can get away with it. That's why it is imperative for the new administration to clamp down and crack down on these crimes.
Interesting stuff. Well, let's see if they do something about it. Jay Christian Adams joining us from D.C. Thank you, sir. That was an eye-opener. All right, meanwhile, a Fox News alert. A wave of terror sweeping the globe. A Russian ambassador gunned down live on television in Turkey. The horrific attack on a Christmas market in Berlin. And a shooting outside of an Islamic center in Switzerland. So how do we stop terrorists before they strike? Dr. Zahudi Jasser is here next. And caught on camera, a police officer writing a ticket in his cruiser when suddenly a car hits him. Well, apparently she hit his car on purpose and ran. We're going to tell you why coming up next.
A Fox News alert this morning, Christmas markets across the country ramping up security. As we learned, the State Department warned ISIS could strike 3 weeks before the Berlin attack.
So what needs to be done to stop terrorists from carrying out their plots? Here to weigh in, we've got the president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy and retired U.S. Naval Officer, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Dr. Jasser, good morning to you. What do you make of this? It's all terror, obviously, but let's start with the Berlin Christmas market attack. Obviously a soft target. It sounds like this guy hijacked this semi full of steel beams and drove at 40 miles per hour with the lights off last night through hundreds of people gathered to celebrate Christmas there.
Well, it's obvious to those of us who've been working for reform for decades that the problem is not the final step where they go operational. You just can't predict it. That's why on Dabiq magazine, Rumiyya magazine, the magazine for ISIS, they tell them to find soft targets, to use non-conventional weapons like vehicles and knives and things, because they want that moment of surprise where they attack Christians, Jews, and other targets of their religious war. So how do you find this? You shift the axis of discussion in this country on security from violent extremism to violent Islamism. It's the global jihad stupid should be our mantra. These are jihadis before they become militant jihadis. They're non-militant jihadis who believe America's evil, who are against democracy, who believe in the Sharia state, who are misogynistic. They're anti-Christian and anti-Semitic online. And I guarantee you, we are not following those ideas online. So therefore, these guys come out of nowhere once we try to find them to be violent, which is often impossible to predict.
Doctor, that terrible attack in Berlin comes as well when there was an assassination in Turkey of the Russian ambassador, off-duty officer yelling Allahu Akbar, pulls out his pistol, and it's all over the cover of the New York Post. Steve's holding it up right now, as well as covers across the country. Yells Allahu Akbar and shoots him in the back, assassinating him, trying to fracture even further relations between Turkey and Russia, which were difficult and have thawed. But it's the same strand of jihad at some level. Should they have seen that coming? How do we anticipate those types of things?
Well, again, who are our friends and who are our allies? If he's from the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, like the killer in Berlin, they're from an Islamic State concept. If they're members of the AKP in Turkey and believe in Islamist state mantra and are against Western ideas, against Russia, against countries that are not Islamist, they're not going to be our friends. I mean, the AKP yesterday tweeted out that this man was a martyr. Remember, the AKP is the party of Erdogan. Yeah. They're very upset that Erdogan was reaching out to Russia and Iran in order to maintain that dictator club in the Middle East. So therefore, it's not just about who our enemies are. The enemies of our enemies are not always our friends. And if they're fighting for freedom in Syria, like our family and others, those are probably our allies. But if they're fighting for jihad, for an Islamic state, for Islamic supremacism across the Middle East, those are our enemies. And we have to be careful not to say, well, Erdogan today is our friend, but he still is the head of an AKP party that is radicalizing his population.
Dr. Jasser, the State Department issued a warning to Americans. They said that this happened 3 weeks ago. The Department of State alerts U.S. citizens to the heightened risk of terrorist attacks throughout Europe, particularly during the holiday season. U.S. citizens should exercise caution at holiday festivals, events, and outdoor markets. How did they know that something like this? Were there warnings that they were seeing, and that was their way of warning all of us to be very careful and vigilant?
Well, here's the thing. There's two areas to look at. One is specifically this individual. We have to leave it to Homeland Security to monitor his ideas, his websites that he's looking at. If it's ideologically, we should be looking at that public footprint. Publicly, we cannot let these chaotic Islamists win by unraveling our fabric of society and who we are. Israel's been dealing with this for decades, and they haven't changed their public celebrations and other things, but they're vigilant. If they see something, they say something. Yeah. Don't always just be staring at your cell phone. Look around at your surroundings. Make sure that you are aware of the fact that anything can become a weapon in a public place.
Well, if they knew about it, why did it
this time of year.
happen? If they knew about it, why did this happen?
Because the enemy to them is anyone who's just violent. This guy probably never projected that he was going to do something violent. If the enemy was Islamist, global jihadism, Salafism like San Bernardino or Orlando, those are all Salafi jihadists. I bet you it would have been on their radar and they would have been able to do something about it.
The other component to it, Dr. Jasser, is the fact that this guy who shot the ambassador is a cop.
I know.
You know, he's a guy who was supposed to have a gun. They just didn't realize that as he was standing behind the ambassador, he was going to start yelling Allahu Akbar and then kill the ambassador. I mean, our important people are protected by officers all the time, guys with guns, and you just don't know when somebody like this nitwit's gonna just, go crazy.
And we saw this in the Cold War. So many of the infiltrators working for the Soviets against us were within our security apparatus. Islamists are within it. The Orlando shooter was a security guard. Many of these folks already have clearances that are working within, but they hate the country that they're in because they're Islamists who don't believe in our contract of society based in secular liberalism, which is the war that we're fighting.
Ultimately, Doctor, you're talking about allegiance. If there's no allegiance to the country you're in, you're just in that country. Well, thank you very much for providing a lot of clarity for us this morning. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Terrible stories.
It really is. All right, Heather's here with some headlines. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. 38 minutes after the hour, a couple quick headlines to bring you right now. The families of 3 Orlando nightclub victims now suing Facebook, Twitter, and Google. They're accusing the tech industry giants of helping to radicalize the shooter Omar Mateen and others like him. That lawsuit slamming the web platforms for failing to shut down terror-related accounts, saying that they're crucial to ISIS recruitment and also funding. Mateen killed 49 people when he opened fire inside that packed Orlando nightclub before he was killed in a shootout with police. Lawmakers set to repeal the highly controversial bathroom bill in a special session planned for tomorrow. The law bans transgender people from using public bathrooms and locker rooms that don't match the genders on their birth certificates and casts the state into a national spotlight. You may recall that musicians, including Bruce Springsteen, boycotted the state over that law. And caught on camera, an SUV slams right into a police cruiser with that officer inside, and police say that this was no accident. Body camera video capturing the sounds of the high-impact crash in Norton, Ohio. Investigators say the woman behind the wheel admitted to doing it on purpose and was trying to take her own life. Oh, goodness. Well, that woman is now undergoing a psychiatric evaluation. And a hero who gave everything for our nation finally getting the proper burial that he deserves. The body of U.S. Air Force Major Troy Gilbert finally arriving at Arlington National Cemetery just in time for Christmas. The country music star Lee Brice, who's close with the family, delivering a powerful performance. Gilbert was killed in Iraq in 2006, but his body was taken by terrorists. His widow was on our show on Friday to react. Listen.
It's sort of unimaginable to take your children back to Arlington National Cemetery 3 times to bury their father, but this time there's a lot more closure to it.
You may recall that Lee Brice was also there with the group Folds of Honor. We've been telling you about that. Reuniting Gilbert's truck with his children here on Fox and Friends. That all happened back in May. Gilbert had sold that truck just before his deployment. To help families like the Gilberts, you can go to foldsofhonor.org. And what a touching moment that was for those kids of his to now have gotten his truck back. But what strikes me about that is seeing the picture as he was set to deploy and the children were so young and now they're all grown up. That family finally reunited with their hero.
Very cool.
He's back home.
She had a set of twins, too.
Yeah.
So many kids to lose.
It's a commitment to those who are still here, but also leaving nobody behind there. I mean, our DOD and others are so committed to bringing everyone home if they can.
And finally, Ginger had closure because that was the third funeral they had. The first time they couldn't find the body, so they had a funeral anyway.
Yeah.
And then a portion of his body was recovered a couple years
She
later.
said the head and the toes, which is hard to hear. But then she said she felt like the rest of his body was in God's hands.
And then they found the whole body, and it was returned.
Most countries don't do this. It's a commitment to life and a commitment to those who serve. It's very cool.
Yeah, Folds of Honor, great organization.
It is indeed. All right, it is 18 minutes now before the top of the hour. Man, it is cold outside, isn't it, Janice Dean?
It is. It's 24 here in New York City, and with the wind chill, it feels even colder than that. Let's take a look at the temperatures. We do have a warm-up on the way, relatively speaking, but as you can see, still really cold, especially across the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes and the Northeast, down as far south as Texas. But look at the 24-hour temperature change. So we're talking about a 24-degree difference in Chicago than it was yesterday. So that is kind of a good sign that things are warming up. We do have a storm system that's exiting the East Coast. We have lake effect snow across the Great Lakes. And then we have a couple of systems moving into the Northwest that will be our weather makers as we head into the weekend. And just looking ahead, we could have a big doozy of a storm on Saturday and Sunday. So that's something we're going to have to watch and make sure that you're alert on, because a lot of people are going to be traveling. But for now, over the next couple of days, a quieter weather pattern, and we're going to warm up the temperatures a little bit. 50 degrees on Monday here in New York City. So be careful what you wish for, and we'll certainly keep you up to date as we get into the holiday weekend travel. Back inside, Pete, Ainsley, and Steve.
We're just hoping for no delays, no travel delays, because a lot of people are leaving this weekend to go home for the holidays.
Yes, ma'am. I'll keep you up to date.
All right,
See what
thank
you
you.
can do. Thanks, Janice. Coming up, continuing coverage of breaking news. We have the vicious terror attacks just days before Christmas, sparking fear all around the globe. Former CIA director and Trump senior advisor James Woolsey is here with the response from the president-elect in the next hour.
Meanwhile, the Trump team remains focused on who will fill the president-elect cabinet positions. Still two positions to go. We go live to our nation's capital for an update coming up next right here on Fox and Friends.
Welcome back. We've got some quick Christmas headlines for you. How you greet someone this time of year says a lot about your politics.
We are going to say Merry Christmas again. Merry Christmas.
We know what he says. According to the Public Religion Research Institute, Democrats and Republicans are nearly polar opposites when it comes to saying either Happy Holidays or Merry Christmas. 66% of Democrats say Happy Holidays is more appropriate, while 67% of Republicans prefer Merry Christmas. There's a political correctness breakdown there. And remember how frantic Arnold Schwarzenegger was trying to get, how frantic he was when he was trying to get a Turbo Man doll in the movie Jingle All the Way.
Darn. Thank you, Pete. President-elect Donald Trump securing his White House victory with a final vote from the Electoral College, and now he's working hard to put the finishing touches on his cabinet. Kristen Fisher is live from Washington, D.C. with the latest details on this search. Good morning to you, Kristen.
Good morning, Ainsley. Well, with exactly 1 month to go until Inauguration Day, the president-elect has filled all but 2 spots in his cabinet. The Secretary of Veterans Affairs and the Secretary of Agriculture are still outstanding, and so are the 2 people that'll have to deal with the media the most, his communications director and his press secretary. But overall, Mr. Trump has moved very quickly to fill out his cabinet. Yesterday, the transition team announced that Vincent Viola will be nominated as Army Secretary. Viola is another billionaire businessman. He's the owner of the NHL's Florida Panthers, but he also graduated from West Point and trained as an airborne Ranger infantry officer. As for VA Secretary, well, a new name has emerged as a serious contender, retired Admiral Thad Allen. Allen actually met with Trump yesterday in Palm Beach, and he's best known for his leadership in responding to Hurricane Katrina and the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Others in the running for VA Secretary include former Massachusetts Senator Scott Brown, Admiral Michelle Howard. She's the first ever African-American woman to command a U.S. Navy ship, and Iraq and Afghanistan war veteran Pete Hegseth. And if you've been watching Fox and Friends, well, then you know. He's also a Fox News contributor, and this morning he's filling in for our very own Brian Kilmeade. So, Ainsley, help me out. Can you try to convince Pete to give me a scoop this morning?
He's right over there with a big smile on his face.
Come on, Pete. Give me something.
I got nothing, sorry.
Nothing?
Nothing. Nope, no scoop for you. Mum's the word.
We'll have to see. We'll be watching. Stay tuned. Thanks so much. Thanks, Kristen. All right, Fox News alert to tell you about more on our top story, the rash of terror attacks around the globe. Former CIA director, Trump advisor James Woolsey, and Dr. Sebastian Gorka both are here with how America should respond in the next hour. Plus, Mr. Trump is a winner again, despite this myth pushed by the mainstream media.
People are still holding out hope that the Electoral College, when they vote tomorrow, will somehow miraculously decide that Hillary Clinton is the winner.
There's a hope. There's a glimmer of hope on the Constitution.
True. Since none of that is true, does that make it fake news? We're going to analyze that next.